everyone, and welcome to episode 176 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and this week, like usual, I'm joined by Richard, the owner of MTG Goldfish. What's up, Richard?
Hey, Seth, what's going on?
Not much. We have a surprising amount to talk about this week. Also, Chris Van Meter, how you doing this week, Chris?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you, and I'm pretty excited. We have a surprisingly full cast, so I was thinking, we'll probably talk about some tournament stuff, some Magic Arena. Then just this morning, out of the blue, we got a ton of Magic 2019 spoilers, even though the set doesn't come out for, I think, a month roughly until pre-release. So we're going to talk M19 spoilers. We're going to talk about some interesting tournaments that happened over the weekend at SCGCON, including some Pauper action, no Bandless Modern, a little bit of Magic Arena now that they've had a new update and changed a bunch of stuff, and then, of course, we will wrap up with Fish Mail. So let's start with the most exciting part, M19 spoilers. Have you all seen the spoilers? This is all happening in like the last hour and a half or so. Have you got a chance to check them out yet?
Maybe. I've seen some spoilers, whether it's all of them or not, because you guys keep springing new spoilers on me, so... the Wizards released an article, the promos and packaging of Magic 2019. So they listed the promos, so your typical buy box promos, F&M promos, and then they decided, hey, we'll just throw in all these random commons and uncommons from the welcome deck, which is, I don't know, maybe like 30-40 cards worth. And then they're saying, here's some random rares for you as well, and they threw in those. And then on Reddit, there are other cards popping up from sources unknown, so we have a lot of spoilers, more than one day's worth of spoilers to look at, which is unexpected to say, because Core 19 is still about a month out. It's middle of July that it releases.
Yeah, I was surprised too. What about you, Chris? Did you get a chance to check them out?
I did. I've been looking at all the spoilers. Some pretty exciting stuff. I think it's interesting to note that Llanowar Elves is in the welcome deck, so we've gone from too powerful for standard to let's inject it into our new players so they know what's up right off the bat, which is fine with me. There are a couple cards that I think are really, really cool. One in particular is one of the promos, the Standard Showdown promos, for Elvish Rejuvenator. So it's 2 in the green for a 1/1 Elf Druid. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You can put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and then put the rest on the bottom in a random order. I think this card is really, really cool. It does a lot of cool things, and we haven't had something like this that like fetches a land and puts it onto the battlefield from a creature in quite some time.
Also, important to note with that, it's a land, so it's not even a basic land, which has a lot of sweet implications, like getting dual lands, utility lands, so it seems like it's actually a pretty powerful card. I don't know about older formats, I don't know if Wood Elves is good enough anymore, but it's definitely interesting that you can use it to, like, assemble Tron or something if you're really trying to.
Yeah, you can try to Green Sun Zenith this, to randomly get a land, although you just might get the feel bads and look at the top 5 cards and find nothing and then shamefully put it back down. So it's actually interesting, and it's coming in a core set, which is surprisingly a lot of upside for this is I guess the rarity isn't known since it's just a promo card.
Well, it looks like it has the common rarity on it, so the other promos have
you're right.
different
so
rarities.
It's just as common.
Yeah,
so like Scry is evergreen, so if somehow the temples end up being in the set, that could be cool. It's a way to find Sovereign Void and get some value. Any lands that have entered the battlefield triggers are cool. Finding Tron could be really cool. I just think cards like this are very solid, and I really like when they print them, but it is an X1, so Chain Whirler food.
Yeah, everything dies to Chain Whirler these days. It should be pretty hard to whiff, though. Like, it'll happen sometimes. I know, I've played way more than my share of Satyr Wayfinders, which only goes 4 cards deep, but you do occasionally whiff with these effects. But going 5 card deep in your typical deck, like the odds are pretty heavily in favor of you getting a land. Of course, you can't get the land you want every time, but still, like, you should be able to play this pretty consistently as a ram spell. I wouldn't be too worried about, like, playing this on turn 3 and just not finding any lands. That's going to happen a really small percentage of the time.
All right. So other cards. So buy a box promo.
Yeah, I was going to point this out. I think that our worst fears are going to be happening with this card.
What are our worst fears? Okay, so let's talk about the card though. Nexus of Fate, 5 blue, take an extra turn after this instant. If Nexus of Fate would be put in a graveyard, anywhere, reveal Nexus of Fate, shuffle it, and put it in its owner's library instead.
This card's good. So any type of time lock card you have to be very careful for, because if they end up being like busted in standard, then they'll end up being busted in standard and it becomes popular. This is going to be a slam dunk in all of your brawl decks that want to play blue. It's going to be a slam dunk in Commander. Like, this is very similar to Beacon of Tomorrow's, and it's an instant. So like, you can cast this with Torrential Gearhulk with a trigger on the stack or some other way to recast instants from your graveyards. Like, this is the type of card that I wanted them to not make as one of these buy a box like unique promos, because if this card catches on, like let's say Alia Antrazi or Saffron Olive makes a standard deck that uses this and it's popular, it's instantly going to be $30 and very hard to get your hands on them.
Yeah, this is way more dangerous than Firesong and Sunspeaker. I really like Firesong and Sunspeaker. I think it's a really cool card. But as far as maybe having actual ramifications in Standard and being super sweet in Commander, like, because you get an extra turn after this one, you kind of like insert yourself into the turn cycle, right? Like you would get to, or how does that work? Maybe I'm misunderstanding that. Like, if it's the person to your left's turn and you cast this after their turn, does it go to your turn?
Yeah, I think you just get a random turn in the middle of the turn order, right?
And then it goes back to the person on your left again, or it skips them and
I think it just inserts the turn. So you go before whoever else was going to go, then afterwards they go. Like, that would make the most sense. I have no idea how this actually works in actuality.
I mean, that's a lot of upside in Commander. That doesn't even include, like you mentioned, Torrential Gearhulk, even just like a turns deck being able to cast it at instant speed, leaving up counter spells and stuff in Standard. Like, 7 mana is a lot, but it's not insane, especially with Hour and Promises and stuff. Like, being able to leave up instant speed interaction and then cast this and take 2 turns in a row if you don't need to counter something or whatever. There's so many things this card does. So I'm not saying it's busted or the best card in the set or anything like that, but it is a little too close for comfort for me as far as being actually playable.
So one of the things that's interesting about the blue-white control deck in Standard is that, like, because of commit to memory, it's able to like kind of play without an actual win condition and then just like win off of like one Gideon or, you know, just some way to try and deck your opponent. And this does exactly that. Like, when you cast this, it just shuffles back into your deck. So like, and the Teferi deck wants to play at instant speed. It's very mana efficient. Like, this is the exact kind of card I wanted them to not make one of these promos as.
And not only that, but it takes advantage of Teferi's mana. Like, since you can cast it as an instant, the untapping of 2 lands suddenly is relevant for casting this when most extra turn spells are sorceries. So, oh man, I don't know. So what's your price prediction? Like, how expensive will this card be?
I think it's going to start at $30.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, Firesong and Sunspeaker, I should double check it. Last time I looked, I think it was the most expensive rare in Dominaria. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was the most expensive mythic or near the most expensive mythic. Like, at least like top 3 from the core set.
That sounds scary. That sounds scary. I don't know if I share the same enthusiasm for Standard as you guys, but we've done research on this before, Seth, and there is a price floor for all take an extra turn cards. Commander players love these cards, so I think fits exactly Firesong. Like, Commander players will love this card, people will try it in Standard, and if it ever takes off, it's going to be ridiculous. So here's hoping that it doesn't take off in Standard and Commander players can actually play this card. I don't know.
Well, the problem that I have with it is that, like, I think it's the step above where Firesong and Sunseeker is as far as a Commander card. Firesong and Sunseeker are really cool, and it's like a card that you want to build your deck around. Like, this isn't a card you build your deck around. This is just a card that you put in every single blue Commander deck that you have, right?
Yep. Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
I think it's just way too ubiquitous, and like you're just, this is the kind of card where like you're going to feel bad when your opponents have it when you don't, when you're playing a blue Commander deck because they were able to get one and you weren't able to get one.
Yeah, I think it's very good, and I'm a little worried. Maybe they'll change course at some point as far as like releasing these cards only as buy box promos. Although they did just published that article a few weeks ago saying they were doing it for the foreseeable future. Like, the article they published today said, like, we're not here to talk about the community's response to these promos, but check out our Twitch stream and there'll be some discussion about it. So I don't know if that means maybe something will change or if they're just going to reiterate what they were already saying. So I don't know. I'm a little nervous.
Yeah, my qualm with the card isn't its power level, right? Like, I don't think it's too good for Standard. I don't think it's too good for Commander. But I think that it's just good enough to be desirable, and the whole gatekeeping aspect of only having one way to get it, requiring you spend $100 on a box and then physically get it from the store, and there's a limited amount that are sent out. That's what really chaps me for it, because I think that's going to create a lot of feel-bad moments for people that want this card.
Yeah, I mean, but it's precisely what Wizards wants, right? I mean, I don't think they make promos with the intent of having them suck and no one wanting them. So here's a promo that's going to be good, and people will buy boxes for them. So that's exactly according to Wizards' plan, right?
They got to make them good enough that people want them, but if they make them too good, they have an entirely different problem on their hands. Like, that's always been my argument against printing these cards, period, is like, it's just such a fine line to walk, because Wizards' incentive, like, is to print a very strong card that's going to make people buy tons of boxes to gain access to it. But then that creates a problem that not everyone can get the card because it's like extremely limited in supply. Game stores get like, I forget the exact numbers, 30 to 60 copies maybe, depending on their store level, but it's not a large amount that you're talking about in the grand scheme of Magic cards. It's like a Ultra Mythic or an Expedition or something, except it's not a reprint. There's no other way to get the card. So I don't know. I still don't like it, and I feel like this is a card that, like, when we talked about it with Firesong and Sunspeaker, a lot of people were like, oh, you're just going too far. Wizards will intentionally make these not good enough that it's never a problem. And I feel like this is a card that's another step in the direction of at least living dangerously and eventually having problems with these type of promos.
All right, let's move on to another promo. It's the draft weekend promo. We have Desecrated Tomb, 3 mana artifact. When one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying.
I don't know about this card. I almost feel like this is like a plant for an upcoming mechanic. I don't know, like, what do you do with it right now in Standard? I guess you can, like, keep casting Squee or something over and over again, but it seems like it could be cool if Delve or Unearth or some mechanic like that was in Standard, but I'm not 100% sure what you do with this card in Standard right now.
Yeah, the wording kind of kills it, because if let's say your entire graveyard full of creatures gets removed, you only get 1 bat instead of, 1 per creature. If it was 1 per creature, then this card has potential for all kinds of shenanigans. But as is, you gotta play some kind of weird value game of recurring your graveyard for these triggers, and it seems like a lot of work for 1/1 bat tokens.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, it works with Eternalize and Embalm because the cards get exiled from your graveyard.
That's true.
So it's just like adding a little bit of value onto that. And if there's ever, a card that like has some cost in your graveyard that you can return back to your hand, that you can discard over and over and do it, and then you can get a little bit of value for that. But this feels like a card that like should have been in the new Innistrad block and not just in the core set.
It's kind of funny with original Squee, like if you can just keep discarding it. But the problem is the payoff is a 1/1, so I can't imagine that that's worth the effort in a format like Modern, just to make a 1/1 every turn for essentially free if you can keep discarding Squee and getting it back to your hand over and over again. So, it would definitely be much more exciting if it was one for each creature, but then that might be even dangerous, or at least very powerful in certain decks. If you could just delve away 4 creatures and make 4 1/1s when you cast like Tasigur or something, that would be a pretty good card.
Yep.
Yeah, my gut tells me that because they made this card a rare, that there's like some common or uncommon cards in the limited format that you would be able to abuse this card with. So they wanted to limit the amount of times you would have that interaction. So I feel like we kind of have to wait and see.
Resembling skeleton.
Plus they made it a promo.
That's true. That usually means that they think it's going to be at least decent. We were talking about earlier, they want to have good cards as promos typically. So, I guess we'll see.
Maybe Dredge is coming back.
Oh boy.
Oh my god, no, no.
All right, next we got Demon of Catastrophes. 2 black. It's a creature demon. 6/6. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Flying Trample.
It's big. It's
This
really
is
big.
Very big.
Absurd, isn't it? Isn't this the best 4-mana 6/6 we've had?
No, I think this card is like significantly worse than
Desecration
Demon.
Like, I can see it being pretty good. Like, I could imagine mono black aggro in standard, which isn't much of a thing because it dies to Chain Whirler, but if you're like sacking Scrap Heap to this and then you can get back the Scrap Heap, I could imagine that being a pretty scary curve. Like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, sack your Scrap Heap to Demon, have this massive beater. I don't know though. I have a hard time imagining this is going to be super good, especially since it still dies to like Revolted Fatal Push, it dies to Unlicensed Disintegration, it doesn't really do anything right away, so you're naturally like 2-for-1ing yourself if you have to sack a creature to cast it, and it's really risky off the top. Like, imagine playing, I don't know, mono black control against blue white control and they fumigate you or something, and then you draw this and you're like, oh my god, I can't even cast my finisher.
So this card certainly has some drawbacks, but there are a few throwaway black creatures that you can play with this. Scrap Heap Scrounger is one, Dusk Legion Zealot is another that comes to mind, but this card also works extremely well with Liliana Death's Majesty. You only have to sacrifice when you cast it, so if you just put it into play from your graveyard with Liliana, you don't have to sacrifice anything. Liliana's +1 is going to create a zombie that you can use to sacrifice to cast this. And while it does die to Unlicensed Disintegration or a Revolted Fatal Push, like if they don't have an answer right away for it, a 6/6 Trample is a lot of pressure when you can put it out there on turn 4.
Yeah,
That's
I like
true.
it as you curve out. Off the top, Seth is right, this is kind of bad if you have nothing, but as you curve out, people played Desecration Demon in the face of Lingering Souls before, meaning you could lock that down for 4 turns if you felt like it. And I think if you just have some random creatures around, like Scrap Heap Scrounger, the drawback here is not too bad. And 6/6 Flying Trample demands an answer immediately, especially off of only 4 mana. So if they don't have anything, they're pretty much dead. And, you know, this is pretty big. Like, if there's a big scary dragon, if there's a phoenix, you can block all day. So this actually lines up pretty well with flying threats that people normally play.
Another issue with the card for the immediate future, and I run into this all the time with black decks, is you already have Gonti and Ravenous Chupacabra, which are both really good. So I think that some decks will probably stick with that. I think, like, maybe if you're being aggressive and have those disposable creatures, this would be in the conversation. But if you're playing a more controlling deck, I think that maybe just, like, Gonti or even Chupacabra might just be better.
Yeah, I certainly see this card potentially seeing play when rotation happens. Like, some of the cards that I have my eye on are like Dreadshade, Cabal Stronghold, those types of things. So I think that this could potentially just be a role player in a mono black deck once Kaladesh and Amonkhet Block leave.
All right. Last spoilers. We have 2 more rares, so we might as well round out with them. First up, we have Patient Rebuilding, 3 blue enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Then you draw a card for each land card put into that graveyard this way.
It seems
Oh
like
boy.
a fun, like, casual mill card. I guess it's an enchantment that's probably drawing you 1.5 cards a turn or something, which isn't bad, but I don't know. I mean, I guess as a finisher all by itself, like if you just play this and counter everything and kill everything, you will win the game eventually, Drown Yard style.
People love the mill cards. So like this is the type of card that like is going to be very good in limited. It's a card advantage engine and a win condition in limited. Like it could potentially see fringe play in some standard deck if there's a mill deck that ever comes out. I mean, we saw Sphinx's Tutelage take down a Grand Prix in the hands of Michael Majors in the past. But this is also just the kind of card that a newer player is going to open. They're going to read it. It's easy to grok. Newer players tend to like alternate ways of winning because it helps them feel clever. And this is a card that most newer players are going to open and be happy about and try and put in their deck.
It's too weird for me. I don't understand it. Next card is a card up my alley. Gigantosaurus. Yes, Gigantosaurus. It's 5 green symbols. So green. It's a 10/10 dinosaur. That's it. That's all it is. It's a 5-mana 10/10.
It seems like... So it makes me want to have Nykthos come back. It seems like it would be super sweet in a green devotion deck. In standard, it is a pretty guaranteed way to play Ghalta. I'm a little sad that it doesn't trample or anything, but I imagine that in standard, people will just try to live the dream and like cast this and know you automatically have 2-mana Ghalta, so...
It eats Yargles.
Well, doesn't Ronus's Monument give the creature trample, and doesn't Ronus's activated ability give the creature trample?
That is a good point. So here's a question for you, Chris. How does this compare with Verdurous Gearhulk? Like, would you play this over Verdurous Gearhulk if you were playing a mono green deck with those cards?
Absolutely not.
But after rotation...
Maybe.
Yeah.
Like, if there's some type of devotion, because we do have, like, Llanowar Elves and Steelleaf Champion, so we have a lot of green pips. So if there ends up being some type of devotion-y thing, either now or... I don't know if this set will rotate before we're done with the Ravnica Saga, but maybe the block after, or the sets after that, maybe it could end up being cool. But this definitely will be relegated to bulk status in the meantime.
And it most definitely does not die to Goblin Chain Whirler. We found one card.
If there's a Soul Scar Mage and they bounce Chain Roller 9 times,
4 Panharmonicons,
they can do it.
Although this will trade with the 10/8 Legendary Worm from Battle Bond and draw you 10 cards in the process, so there's always that.
All right, last card we're going to talk about is a card we don't even know where it came from. It looks real. So, Vivien Reid, Planeswalker. 3 green, 5 starting loyalty. Legendary Planeswalker Vivien. +1, look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land from among them and put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. -3, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. -8, get an emblem with creatures you control have +2/+2, vigilance, trample, and indestructible.
My initial take on this was asking if it was one of the Planeswalker deck Planeswalkers. Apparently, it is not, is what we're hearing. So I think I like that we're seeing a green Planeswalker that is not Nissa or Garruk. It's kind of cool to see a new character, but the card itself, it seems worse than most of like the Nissas and Garruks and stuff that we've had. I guess the +1 is fine-ish, but it actually is pretty bad at protecting itself, so you gotta have creatures down, and I don't know. I don't really see this card as standard playable.
So, the first impression I have is, yes, the ultimate is going to win you the game. So it strikes me similar to like Elspeth Sun's Champion ultimate. But with those cards, like the rest of the card has to be worth the 5 mana that you're paying for it. And I don't think that the +1 is good enough. Going to 6 loyalty probably seems fine, but like, why would you ever play this in your deck when you could play Karn or Vraska? Like, Vraska seems very similar to this card, but way better. Karn also seems similar to this card, but way better. It does not feel like you're getting enough for 5 mana.
I will say, I think there's maybe right now before Kaladesh dash block rotates, there is some upside to the -3. Like, having something that like kind of draws you cards with the +1 and can blow up a Heart of Kirin or an Ether Sphere Harvester or whatever, even like search for Iskanta. There's a lot of good artifact and enchantment targets right now that see play across a pretty wide range of decks, so that is kind of an upside. I think like I don't know. I guess maybe I was underrating that ability. I still don't think it's great, but I do kind of like the wide variety of things you can kill with the -3.
Yeah, and creatures with flying. You can hit a Lyra. You can hit a Shalai.
You can hit a Rekindling Phoenix and it comes back and kills your Vivien.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of white-based enchantment removal right now, too. And you're seeing a lot of, like, the flip enchantments. And I think that even post-rotation, cards like Search for Iskanta and Argul's Bloodfast are going to continue to be extremely popular tools. So just like having a way to interact with that and still keep things around. That being said, I would trade this for something like Reclamation Sage in a heartbeat.
So does that bring us to the end of our M19 spoilers?
Yeah, there's a ton more spoilers. You can check them on the site. We can't cover them all, but Shivan Dragon is back. Surprise. Murder. We have Reliquary Tower as a reprint. There are a ton of cards, so check out the full spoilers because we don't have time to talk about every single one right now.
So before we move on to some tournament stuff, really quick, like 2-sentence answer. Seeing these leaks, more or less hyped for M19? Richard?
More?
All right, that was 2 sentences.
Would you like me to elaborate? No, that's it.
No, that's fine.
That's done.
Chris, how about you? More or less hyped?
I'm more hyped. I like seeing new cards, whether I think they're good or not. I'm just excited with seeing new cards.
Yeah, I think I am too. I've been hyped for the core set, but we're seeing some good reprints. We're seeing some sweet new cards, so I will look forward to the rest of the cards as spoiler season progresses. So now that we have spoilers out of the way, we had a really unique tournament, or I guess like group of tournaments this weekend. There was SCGCON, and they had the SCG Invitational with Standard and Modern. They had a whole bunch of stuff, but we wanted to focus on a couple of the more unique formats that don't see play, at least in paper, all the time. So 2 of the most interesting tournaments to me from the weekend were Pauper, the first ever Pauper Classic event held by Star City Games, and also No Banless Modern, which is maybe the first ever tournament for that, or at least the first big tournament of that. So did either of you get to catch any of the action from SCGCON, and what did you think of these events, Pauper and No Banless Modern?
I did not see any of these events. I see the results, which have questions raised in my head. But I'll let you guys go first to describe what happened before I ask my question.
Yeah, so I watched a bit of both. Not surprised with how the Pauper tournament turned out. As Kendra, who won, is a very diligent Pauper streamer and plays a lot of Pauper, and she has been working on her Elves deck for quite some time. The No Banlist Modern, though, I am a little surprised about it, and I'll be curious to see if it helps make a case for any potential unbannings in the format. Because, like, yes, in that field where everything's legal, you can't get, like, 100% of an idea of how something would do in the current Modern format, but, like, cards like Stoneforge Mystic and whatnot just did not look or feel very good, and obviously Ayavugan is the most busted card on the current Modern ban list, as we can see from all the colorless Eldrazi decks.
Yeah, so was that representative of the tournament? Because looking at, the colorless Eldrazi is basically everywhere, and what we have is essentially our pre-Eye of Ugin banning Eldrazi list with basically like 2 GTAs thrown in. And that is not the deck I would have thought of when you said, hey, everything on the ban list is coming off. You can do whatever you want. And we basically just played an actual deck from, a year or two ago with some GTAs thrown in for good measure.
Man, do you remember how busted that format was? Like, right after the Pro Tour?
Was,
oh, my goodness. That was probably the single worst time in Modern's history, I think, as far as, like, format health and how much fun the format was. Although, I did enjoy playing Freewind Red. Ensnaring Bridge and Blood Moon, so good against that deck. I think that the tournament definitely suggested to me a couple of things. Like, Eldrazi, that deck was busted. I'm so glad that they banned Eye of Ugin, and I still think they could have banned Eldrazi Temple too. Like, that card is still pretty busted. I do think that Stoneforge Mystic is probably safe for unbanning. One of the things that really stuck out to me, well, the two biggest things were Skull Clamp wasn't a big part of this. Like, I know Randy Buehler did this Gauntlet of Greatness or something of No Ban List Modern a while ago, and that tournament that he did, or that content that he did, it seemed like Skull Clamp decks were the way to go. Like, Elves with Skull Clamp, I think, actually ended up winning it in the end, and Skull Clamp decks, Death and Taxes with Skull Clamps were just, like, the biggest thing when he was doing that. So I was surprised by that. Also, Stoneforge, like, just unban it. Like, there's so many things that are crazy and powerful in Modern. Stoneforge is not scary. Also, the other thing, no Hypergenesis. That was the other card that I would have picked to be near the top of the busted list as far as someone just breaking the format, and I don't see a single Hypergenesis list in this top 25, so.
Well, that's because they all played against the Eldrazi decks and they just got chaliced into oblivion.
That's probably true. As far as Eldrazi, like, I think part of it is people have those cards. It's really hard to go out and buy a $1,000, $1,500, $1,800 deck just to play in the one no ban list Modern tournament that has ever been held, because that's just not a great investment. But if you've been playing Standard / Modern / Legacy, you probably already have those cards, and maybe you were even playing that deck a couple years ago and you just like stuck all your Eldrazi away and you're like, oh, this is an easy way for me to go play this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other interesting things were like how popular and how well the Black-Green Dark Depths deck did. So like getting access to Chrome Mox, the card Dark Depths obviously is very, very good. BBD's Miracles deck was kind of cool. One thing that's super interesting to point out is Jesse Hefner got 14th with Jund, and he just literally put in 4 Deathrite Shaman and 1 Jite, and like every other card in this deck is currently Modern legal. So it's just like, I want to play in this deck. In this tournament, what can I do? Oh man, I can put Deathrites in my deck. I guess I can throw in a Jite. Let's see what happens, and then just top 6.
That's my hero right there. Further down we have a punishing Jund list. They were expecting little creatures, but Jesse's just like 4 Deathrites. Let's go.
Yeah, just run it. Yeah, I mean, man, there's so much Eldrazi, and because the structure's so explosive, right? Like, yes, Skull Clamp is insane and like can help you combo with elves and things like that. I am a little surprised there was no combo elves, but like, Chalice on 1 is pretty good against the elf combo deck, and the Eldrazi deck is just so fast.
Yeah, that deck is busted. I forgot how busted that was. There was also a Death Shadow list that made it. I think it was on 25th place, so at the bottom of the list, but I guess it looked a lot like the current ones, except you get some busted spells. I think another takeaway was
Treasure Cruise, only Treasure Cruise.
Treasure Cruise, Ponder Preordain.
There were a lot of mental missteps.
Do you think that this tournament makes an argument for unbanning any of the cantrips? I would have thought, oh, Storm is going to be super good. Like, you give Storm, Ponder and Preordain and Gitaxian Probe instead of Serum Visions and Sleight of Hand and Opt. Like, that's got to make the deck way, way better. But apart from the Miracles deck and 1 Storm deck sneaking in, we didn't really see the blue cards make an impact at all.
I think Chalice on 1 answers most of this. I think that shows how strong throwing down an early Chalice is. If Mental Misstep could counter something with CMC2, you might get somewhere. But I think just the fast mana from Eldrazi is really throwing kinks into things. And if you remove the Eldrazi, let's say it's no ban list Modern except Eye of Ugin is banned, what happens? I think that would be a very different tournament than what we saw here.
Like the problem you run into not only with Chalice being pretty insane against the cards that are banned, but also like the speed with which Thought Knot Seer in combination with Chalice can just disrupt the opponent, and then you finish the game. Like, you get, even if you get to cast 1 or 2 Ponders, you're just actually dead on like turn 3. So, yeah, I mean, Killer Eldrazi is just too good, I think.
As far as Pauper, I think I was pleasantly surprised that there were only 4 Delver decks in the top 16, which, I mean, still makes it, I believe, the most prevalent deck in the top 16, but in my experiences on Magic Online, it seems like you play against Delver decks all the time, and I thought they were clearly the best deck in the format, so I was pretty happy to see a pretty good variety of decks posting good finishes at Pauper, and it wasn't just overwhelmingly Delvers in the top 16.
So I feel like the big disparity of Delver decks online as opposed to what you see in paper has to do with the medium of playing online. Like, most of the non-Delver Pauper decks are pretty grindy decks and take a while to win, and that's something that you have to take under heavy consideration when you're playing your deck online. Whereas in paper, like, you can play this Monarch deck or the Tortured Existence deck and be able to quickly go through things by having good manual dexterity and kind of control the pace of the game, whereas it's way more difficult to do that online unless you're heavily practiced at it.
So let's move on. Anything else on the tournament scene before we move on and hit Magic Arena quickly on our way to Fishmail?
The format is surprisingly accessible. So, like, after I saw this, I went and did some pricing for some of the lists, and like, you can get most of these decks for under $100 or around $100, and even like the White Red Monarch deck that Zane Sweetman top aided with, it's like $60.
Yeah,
and these are decks that like top aided a big tournament, getting hundreds of dollars worth of store credit, so it's very accessible.
And that's after we've seen some meaningful price increases since Pauper has started to become more of a thing in the paper world. So you can still get a pretty good discount on a Pauper deck. And it'll be interesting to see, like, if this is the first step towards more Pauper tournaments. Like, is Pauper going to take the next step and legitimize itself in paper? Or is it going to be kind of the Frontier thing or Tiny Leaders thing where you have that 6 months or a year where people are hyped and then it kind of like fizzles away a little bit? So
there's another big Pauper tournament at Grand Prix Vegas.
That's true. Pauper Championship, I think they're calling it. So that should be interesting as well. All right, so Magic Arena, on our way into Fishmail, we got the update. We have best of 3 tournaments, we have sideboarding, we have a new timer system that's supposed to enable combo decks. I might be forgetting some things. I think those are the big ones. So have you guys been playing any Arena since the update went into effect?
Yeah, I played a quick play tournament, so the old quick constructed, and then I played the new best of 3 constructed with the sideboard. So I got to try that out.
And what did you think? Like, how do you like the best of 3 compared to the best of 1?
I actually don't like it. So first, I got a big slap in the face as I had to mulligan into Oblivion so many times. I forgot how good it felt not to mulligan. So once we went so if you don't know, in best of 1, they draw you 2 hands and give you a hand that is supposed to represent your ratio of lands. And how that works out in reality is you don't mulligan that often. I mulligan maybe 1 in 10 games or something. It's very little. When you go back to regular Magic, there's just so much mulliganing, which I forgot about because I've been playing Arena exclusively for the past month or 2. So I actually didn't like that at all. I felt like a lot of games are decided by the mulligan, whereas in best of 1, yeah, sometimes your hand sucks, but at least you get to play, and even though it works out to be the same, you don't feel as bad. So I actually really like the best of 1 format. And secondly, the rewards don't scale. So the best of 3 events, they cost twice as much. They pay out twice as much in terms of gold, but they only guarantee 3 rares when you go 5-0 or 5x. Whereas the quick constructed, you go 7x, you get at least 2 rares, usually 3 rares. But you played twice as many games for the best of 3s, so the rewards aren't proportionate. So I think it's actually better to just grind out quick constructed best of 1s, and it's just much faster that way as well. So best of 3, hasn't really hooked me. You know, playing quote unquote real Magic actually felt kind of worse. So I actually kind of like this best of one format, and given how the rewards are structured, that's how I'm gonna keep playing. And the decks didn't seem to change that much between, and my deck doesn't change much after sideboard, so I'm fine with best of ones.
Is there much downside to implementing the same type of like hand generation system to a best of 3 as they have in best of 1?
I think for a pure digital experience, that's what should happen, but people want it to reflect real paper Magic. So eventually...
Then play real paper Magic, right?
I think the problem is they're like...
But that's how pros practice.
It all comes down to what Wizards' goal is. Like, if they want this to be Magic Duels, where it's just like, oh, this fun, fast experience online, then I think they should do it. But they've been talking about like, oh, we're going to run PTQs. Maybe someday we'll be able to run GPs on Magic Arena. And if they're going to try to turn it into like the new Magic Online with these high-end tournaments, then I think you got to have it reflect paper Magic.
Well, so like the whole that's how pros practice thing is, that's more of an argument to have it be the other system, right? Like, from experience practicing for a large tournament, like, I'm not interested in what, you know, the 10 to 15% is on either side of the bell curve, what happens when me or my opponent is mulliganing to, like, you know, 4 or 5 or whatever. I'm more interested in what normally is going to happen and how I can play properly in those instances to actually win the game. So, like, I can see the argument for wanting it to mirror paper Magic if you're having like prizes that you can get through this client that you can also get through paper Magic, because that only makes it fair. But if they don't have that, then like having it be a digital experience, I think is better, not only from the player's perspective, but also from like using it as a tool for tests for the Pro Tour perspective.
I'm also really curious what happens when people who start Magic on Magic Arena pick up paper Magic, and they're like, oh my, the shuffler's broken. What's the matter with this paper game? Like, I keep mulliganing, I don't have any lands.
Yeah, people already complain about that, right? With Magic Online, even Arena, they're like, oh, the shuffler's broken because, you know, they don't shuffle as well in real life, and, you know, their lands clump or whatever. So it was quite jarring for me. Like, I played Magic for a long time, and I'm used to, you know, the randomness of your hands, and I mulligan pretty aggressively too. And after playing Arena for like 6 weeks or 2 months or whatever it's been, and not really playing Magic Online, the mulliganing like really hit me. I did not expect to see that. And I play a Llanowar Elf deck. Like, one land Llanowar Elf I'll keep. So I'm not even that picky. So it was actually quite jarring. So I think Chris is right. Maybe we should bring this to best of 3, and maybe Wizards should just draw that separation, because from a new player perspective, when you play Hearthstone, you don't really get mana screwed. And most people, even though they recognize mana screw as a part of the game, they don't like it. So I think smoothing out your mana in a reasonable way without, you know, changing the game altogether, because you could make your lands a different deck or something and draw one every turn and basically be Hearthstone, but this keeps the spirit of Magic and deck building and stuff while also easing mulligans, because they've done it before. You know, we had the Vancouver mulligan introduced a couple of years back, trying to get mulligans to feel, you know, less bad. And I think the best of 1 Arena implementation is actually very good.
So moving on from that with Arena, a couple things I want to mention. I forgot, they announced that the competitive drafts are 1,500 gems, which is roughly $10, which is insanely expensive, I think, for being Magic Arena. I thought they were going to clearly be cheaper than Magic Online, and $10 is rough, basically the same, even in an absolute sense, not even the weird, like, oh, you can sell your cards on Magic Online sense. Like, that's what it costs to do a Phantom Draft on Magic Online, so it's just literally the same price. The other thing is, they tried to fix the clock so you could combo. I tried to play New Perspectives. You still can't combo. So if Wizards is listening, I hope they go to the chess clock. I really think, whatever you think of Magic Online, the chess clock system, I feel like it works really well. And I would like to see that come to Magic Arena, because it's pretty disappointing to have decks like New Perspectives. I imagine some of the older format combo decks would also run into the same problem, where you just literally can't go through your combo before it times you out, and then it just automatically passes your turn and automatically discards cards to hand size if you're playing New Perspectives and have a bunch of cards.
It doesn't even let you clean up correctly?
No, it just is like, okay, here you have 7 cards at random left in your hand. It's your opponent's turn now.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, though, so they gave us all of the Kaladesh cards and Aether Revolt cards. So you pretty much have a pretty decent collection from that block. But the quick drafts this weekend were Kaladesh Aether Revolts, and I could not play them. There was no reason to drop all your gems or gold to play these because you already own most of the cards, and it's just not worth it. It's just so expensive because there is no Phantom Draft. You're going to open these cards which you don't want anyway, and that's going to be a problem for every set as we get deeper into each set. When you have enough Dominaria cards, you don't want to draft Dominaria because most of the cards you open are useless to you. So the fact that we don't have Phantom Drafts, I think, will rear its head later in the development of each block, and we're seeing it with Kaladesh since they kind of just gave us all the Kaladesh cards.
Well, let's move on to some fish mail, I think, while we still have a few minutes left.
All right. If you have your questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. So first question, AntCook91. Do you think that people might start running Tonkatli Honor Guard to try to combat Chain Roller? What does the Honor Guard do?
Honor Guard is a torpor
torpor
orb on a 1/3 body. The problem with Honor Guard is it's just not a very powerful creature. So I don't know if it's worth playing a one. I mean, I guess it's a good blocker against like Bomat Courier, kind of. I don't think you want to fight that aspect of Goblin Chain Whirler. I guess maybe if you're playing tokens or some deck that just gets wrecked by it, you could sideboard it. But I think what we saw in the tournaments this weekend is the way people are dealing with Chain Whirler is just playing control decks that, like, you do 1 damage to me, I don't care. Like, whatever. I'll just play blue-black Scarab God or blue-white Control.
Yeah, I mean, as a 1/3, I don't think it's good enough. I could potentially see, like, a Banalish Marshall style deck could probably use it, or if there's any, like, type of synergies with its creature types. But I don't think that Chain Whirler is, like, enough to make me want to play a 1/3 that does nothing against the control decks.
All right, next question, Tidal Wave 87. I know Seth has a P.O. box for signing cards, but is there any way to get something signed by Richard or any other Goldfish team members? We'll put up a page. So you can send cards to me as well, so we'll put up a page with all of our addresses and contact information. So I'll put that up and then reply to the tweet. Lock Boyle, with Chain Whirler ruling standard, could powerful cards like Dark Confidant, Baleful Strix, and Noble Hierarch find a place in a standard set? Or would they be too dominant?
Oh boy.
I could see I actually think that Baleful Strix would be okay in standard. Like, I think that card it's very strong, but I think it's relatively okay for standard. I don't know about Dark Confidant or definitely not Noble Hierarch. Like, we just got Llanowar Elves back. I don't think they're gonna give us Noble Hierarch. I think it's arguable that Noble Hierarch should have just never been printed. That it actually might just be too good at what it does.
So I think that all 3 of them are too good for standard. So, like, there was a time in, like, when Theros was being spoiled that I thought that would be a perfect spot for Baleful Strix. Not only just because I thought it would be a cool card in standard, but, like, the Mechanical Owl also fits, like, the Greek mythology aspect of it. And they didn't put it there. So I'm not sure where else it would fit in thematically, but it's too good of a rate. Like, that card would have to be 3 or 4 mana right now with the current way they're designing cards.
Yeah, and there will be a time where Chain Roller rotates out, so you don't want to leave all these cards crazy. And then if for whatever reason red is not viable, you just have all these crazy cards running around. So just having a single card keep these otherwise crazy powerful cards in check seems a little fragile. Sebastian Tans, Seth Richard, do you think Cabal Therapy is too good to be put in standard and modern? I think its combo with Probe would have been too good, but Probe is banned. What are your thoughts?
I think that in Standard, it might actually be okay, but I think that it would probably be too good in Modern. Like, Dredge is a thing, Young Pyromancer is a thing, Mardu Pyromancer is already pretty good, so I think it might be too good in Modern.
I don't know. I don't think that it would. I don't think that it would be too good in Modern. I also don't think that it would be too good in Standard, but it also is just like one of those cards that is kind of just like a slippery card. Like, it can create a lot of feel bad moments on like when you whiff or when you hit. Plus, like, that means that flashback would have to come back, and I'm not sure how they would implement that. Like, I think flashback as a mechanic is too good. Well, not too good. It's just like very good, and I don't think that Cabal Therapy is something that they would want to put in a Standard set.
Yeah, I think Therapy is too good for Standard. At most, we have, if Standard is very diverse, you might have 2-3 sets, or 2-3 decks, or 2 to 4 decks. If it's not diverse, you might have 1 to 2 decks. And as soon as you see them play a land, you can probably name a good hit for Cabal Therapy, which I think would be too devastating. The minute you see Irrigated Farmland, you're like Fumigate, Settle the Wreckage, Teferi, and the game is probably over. So I don't think that's safe for Standard. Modern, I'm not sure, but I would definitely be jamming for Therapies if they were Standard legal.
I could see a Therapy variant.
Without the flashback, maybe?
Yeah, just like some type of card that allows you to like name something and grab all the copies in their hand.
That would be
just
fun.
like
Fixed Therapy.
Yeah, it could just be like 2 blue-black, look at target opponent's hand, and then name a card, and they discard all copies of the named card or whatever. Just like some type of fixed card that does that type of effect.
I was going to say, if it was literally just Therapy without flashback, that would be a pretty horrible card, I think.
I would still play.
Would you really?
I don't know. It's a little questionable, but I feel like, especially Standard right now, there's just basically a couple of cards that always beat you. So if you can name them, like, you're good to go. Like, when I play, I just gotta name, like, Fumigate or Settle the Wreckage, and then the match is over. So if I had that ability, I think that would be pretty strong.
But, like,
how about something like this, right? Where you have, like, 1 or 2 mana, it's Therapy, but it has Kicker sacrificing a creature, and if you kicked it, you just do it again right away.
That would work. Or, like, Therapy and the Kicker lets you look at their hand. Like, name a card and take it from your opponent's hand. If you sack a creature, you get to look first and then choose. That could work.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of these cards because there's always so much discussion and debate as to what you should have named. Like, when you're doing it blind, it's actually very interesting. And some of the best Legacy articles I like reading are, what should you Therapy given whatever land your opponent just played and, this hand that you have. So it's kind of like brainstorming. So
I've been leveled by blind Therapy so much in Legacy. There's been so many times where, like, I brainstorm in response to a turn 1 blind Therapy, and then I just, like, still hit.
Yeah.
I even had one where it was Enter the Infinite. Like, I was 100% sure my opponent would just, like, never name Enter the Infinite, so I kept 2 of them in my hand and hid the important cards. He just snapped off Enter the Infinite, and I lost because of it.
All right. Next question. Jope Crowley. Mr. Olive noting about Pauper Delver being everywhere. With the coming Pauper events by Channel Fireball and SCG, should Delver be banned to ensure a healthy Pauper meta?
Well,
when did you make these comments, Seth?
I think on Twitter I talked about it after losing to it for, like, I don't know, 4 out of 5 games in a Pauper League or something.
Right. Has your opinion changed given the top 16 from the SCG Pauper Classic?
For paper, I think the answer is yes. I think on Magic Online, Pauper Delver, I still feel like I play it 3 out of every 5 rounds of every Pauper League I play on Magic Online, but in paper, based on the results we got this weekend, it looks pretty healthy.
All right. Next question, Sebastian Tans. Which is the better Tinker target for casual play? Platinum Empyrean or Sphinx of the Steel Wind?
Jeez. Probably Empyrean still, I guess. It maybe depends on your metagame, but probably Platinum Empyrean.
I think Sphinx, because then it doesn't just, like, get shattered or some weird effect
yeah,
like that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I like Sphinx. It has, like, so many So many keywords on it.
Yeah.
And it has pro red. Does
word
it get
soup.
shattered? Vandal. Well, I guess it gets vandal blasted. It doesn't get.
Yeah, it doesn't get shattered or neutralized. Pro red and green.
Next question. The Green Robbie. Do you swear? The last podcast had all three of you use the word silly to describe Arena's finances and goals, which felt a little out of place. So I'm assuming yes. How often do you have to restrain yourself when making content? And do you ever slip up?
I slipped up once in a video a long time ago.
Oh, I remember this.
I didn't even do it really out loud as part of the game, but Moto froze up and I said something under my breath, but the mic picked it up, so I didn't even realize it was in there until I woke up the next morning and had just so many comments about me saying the F word. But I actually don't swear that much in my private life either, so I don't feel like I have to restrain myself. I'm just in the habit of not swearing that often.
I swear too often. So I have to rein it in when I'm doing content. My early live streams were very bad, but I did get better. I have gotten better.
Oh, you gotta dig this up. I haven't seen this side.
Yeah.
I'm I don't know, a normal swearer. I swear sometimes, but I don't swear nonstop, or we usually try to keep it family friendly on all of our content, so we don't swear in our content. But even in real life, I'm probably not going to swear that much if you actually meet me.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to swear to strangers.
Yeah. Oh, good to meet you, Chris. Well, blank you.
Yeah, how the F are you?
All right, Faradin42. I've been looking to get into Vintage, but I don't have endless money. As a solution, I've been playing X-Mage as a free way to play decks and test options without paying a ton. So suggestions for getting into Vintage?
As far as decks to play, or actually the financial aspect of it?
Maybe is there actually a deck that's significantly, I guess, Fish or something, but I mean, maybe how to get into Vintage, period.
I don't know if there's a good way, because the decks that are budget friendly are $5,000 instead of $25,000. Although the one exception, and the deck hasn't been doing super well right now, but for a time, people would be able to play Eldrazi decks, very similar to what you see in Legacy. There was a no power Eldrazi deck that a year ago that ended up finishing really highly at a tournament. So that's one option. Just play Eldrazi and without power and hope for the best. Otherwise, I guess just start saving your money. Because essentially everything plays power, and even the cheap decks are very expensive compared to other formats.
Yeah, I mean, Vintage is just super expensive. And there are some decks that you can play, but it's kind of going to a sword fight with a Nerf sword. So there is going to be some level of feel bad that you're going to run into. But if that's what you want to do, then you certainly can. Decks that don't use power are generally some type of Null Rod Hate Bear style deck. So the first investment I would suggest is to buy Null Rods if you wanted to play no power Vintage.
Yeah, I would say play Magic Online, where your Vintage decks kind of cost the same as your modern decks. I'm actually looking at Vintage Dredge. It's apparently 150 tickets. It's really cheap. So I would play online. I wouldn't play paper if you have to worry about finances. If you're the kind of person that can just throw money around without caring, then okay, Vintage is probably fine for you. But if you need to save and it's a struggle, I wouldn't even bother. It's just so much work, and I don't think your intent of playing Vintage is to play underpowered decks. When people want to play Vintage, they want to play Black Lotus, they want to play Mox, they want to play other power, and you can do that on Magic Online. So I would go the Magic Online route. Next question. Tidal Wave 87. Do you know if Modern Burn has ever taken down a large tournament? I've heard Modern is all about knowing your deck and playing it well, but I haven't seen anyone own Burn like other decks.
It has. Not recently, but I'm pretty sure that there have been big tournaments in the past that Burn has won.
Yeah, Brandon Burton won a Grand Prix with it.
That very good. That was a year ago, maybe?
Yeah, and I want to say that there was a Burn deck in one of the modern PT top 8s before they took it off the as a format, took it away.
Yeah, I would play Burn. I know a lot of players don't like Burn because they think it's not hard, but actually play Burn against other people, and it is extremely difficult to play that deck correctly. Because when you play against Burn, you just die. You're like, wow, that good, lucky draw, good skill. When you play Burn, nothing gets accomplished and everyone just crushes you. That's how I feel every time I play Burn. So it just shows how hard that deck is to play. When you should be killing creatures and when you should be going face is actually a very difficult thing to figure out. USA Forever 7, how do you feel about people playing cards in different languages in Paper Magic?
I think it's fine. I think if you want to do that to kind of bling out your deck or whatever, yeah. I mean, just if your opponent does it, just feel like you can call a judge and get the Oracle text.
Yeah, just don't be afraid to call a judge and get an Oracle text. I know there have been people in the past that would intentionally play non-English cards, especially if they're cards that don't see common play, to try and get over on their opponent. So if you aren't sure about something, 100% always call a judge and get the Oracle text. You can ask your opponent, but your opponents never have your best interest in mind, so just always call a judge if you have a question.
Yeah, I think part of the appeal of Magic is it's a international game and we have a worldwide community. So it's actually cool that if someone's visiting from Japan or France or something and they whip out their Magic deck that's all foreign cards, that's actually pretty cool. So I think we shouldn't ban that or anything like that. Although, some people will try to use foreign cards as a, distraction or something to gain an advantage, but like Chris and Seth said, you can always call a judge and they'll pull up the Oracle text for you.
And those instances are few and far between. It's more so just oh man, I've watched a lot of anime and I love Naruto and I want to get a bunch of Japanese cards. So I have a bunch of Japanese cards. I mean, that's why I have a bunch of Japanese cards. But yeah, it's just a cool way to kind of express yourself and what you think is cool.
All right, that's all our fish mail this week. Thank you to everyone who sent them in. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail.
And I think that brings us to the end of episode 176 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard, Chris, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. We will be back next week from GP Vegas, actually. We'll be out in Vegas when we're recording the next one. So, we'll see you then. This is the crew signing out.